is Hard Parking, brought to you by Right Honda and Right Toyota out of Scottsdale, Arizona. I am your host, Jay Finning. As promised, coming up on today's episode, we have Mr. Zach Johnson, professional baseball player. Spent a little time on the phone with him while he was visiting family up in Canada. At this point, he is already back in Germany, getting ready for probably the next season because he plays professional sports over there. A little different conversation. This is something that's been in the works for a long time. Got to get in front of this and just let you guys know that our phone connection was terrible. While I enjoyed the conversation, I hated the connection. But I encourage you guys to listen all the way through because he's a very inspirational story. He's a gift. His mindset and outlook on things are kind of refreshing. You hear how he's kind of kept his head up, among all the little setbacks that he's had in his life and many of us have in our lives. Barrett Jackson just wrapped up this weekend. So hopefully in the next episode, we can talk about a little bit, as well as I just spent some time in a 2014 BMW M6. New sponsor to announce in the next episode as well. That sponsor threw me the keys to said M6. So excited about that. So right after this 4-Wheel Online spot, check out Mr. Zach Johnson. Jay Finning here, and I want to tell you guys about 4-Wheel Online. For over a decade, 4-Wheel Online has been bringing the best truck accessories and truck parts to enhance the appearance and performance of all trucks and SUVs. They are dedicated to providing an extensive range of upgrades that will match any maker model on the road. The truck products cover everything you need to give your truck a custom look and added functionality. And if you need a tire and wheel package, head over and use the configuration tool. They carry all the major brands of wheels and tires, so go get outfitted today. So visit them online at 4Wheel Online or call them at 813-769-2451. Again, that's 4-Wheel Online, the number 4-Wheel Online. It's time for the social media highlight of the week, brought to you by The Cell Shop, an Arizona-based retailer that strives to be your destination of choice for wireless services. Visit them at cellshop.us, that's CELLSHOP.us. Zach Johnson, it's been a while, professional baseball player, podcast friend. What's up, man?
Yeah, at first, appreciate having me on. I know we kind of, talked about it in a few different instances of getting it together and just various scheduling conflicts or just life things that kind of popped up. So definitely happy to be here. And like you said, kind of over it's crazy to say, but almost the 2 years kind of been communicating and knowing each other. It's been awesome to get to know you and kind of build a bit of a relationship and a rapport in different ways for sure. So it's awesome. Thank you for having me on.
That's a very nice way of saying, Jay, you keep dropping the ball and putting me on the back burner. So I appreciate you for that. But that wasn't the case.
No, I'll take the onus on it for sure. Obviously goes both ways, I guess. But no, I definitely have had a lot of stuff, as a lot of people have over the transparency the last couple of years. And just is what it is. But hey, everything kind of works out in divine time. So happy to be here when I'm able to.
So speaking of the last couple of years, the pandemic era, and I've talked about, I would mention your name and Brian's name, and people are very familiar with Wes Tankersley because we do the One Drink Wednesday, which you had recently jumped in with us on a One Drink Wednesday, which was an awesome surprise to us. But, this pandemic era was supposed to be over in 2021, and here we are in early stages of 22. And, one of the biggest differences that I tell people is, the rest of the world is not doing what we're doing. Some people are a lot more strict. Some people aren't strict at all. You've been over in Germany for 2 years now. You're in, we're recording and you're in Canada right now, but how long have you been over in Germany with your current stint?
Consistently since 2019, I've been in Germany. So just, about 2 and a bit years that I've been back there for sure.
When you go back from after having this conversation, do you have to quarantine, or what are they doing now that they weren't doing before? Or is everything just as...
So originally, coming back, I got back into North America, into Canada on mid-December. So I got back December 13th. I was originally supposed to be here until the 8th of February. But like you said, just the ever-changing flow of how things are. I'm headed back actually this weekend, so I fly back on Saturday. And it's a bit to do with the lockdowns, but it's also a bit to do with the regulations, and also with how things are starting to tighten up here and things like that. So When I did leave originally, there was no quarantine when I did go back. And, obviously keeping an eye on it. My wife is keeping an eye on it as well. And it's kind of developed over the past month that I've been here. And it's to the point now that when I go back, I have to quarantine for 10 days. And then I have to take a test after 10 days. And then if I'm free and clear, then I'm out of quarantine. And if not, then I have to do another 4 days and kind of see where things are at. So as far as flying internationally too, on the way here, it's the same way as going back. You just have to do a PCR test before. You have to, make sure you have all your documentation in the medical record and the arrival app. So, in Canada, it's called ArriveCan. It's a Canadian arrival app. And then Germany has a very similar instance where you just have to log your stuff. And then they do a little bit of contact tracing in the sense that who's picking you up or how are you getting to your location. When you're at your location, can you quarantine in a zone where you're not going to be in contact. So I had to fill out those forms both ways coming here. And then when I'm going back, I have to fill the same thing out. So it's kind of similar between Canada and Germany a little bit. I can't speak to the United States because I haven't traveled into the United States in a while. But as far as the contact tracing and stuff like that, I think it's pretty across the board, similar in that way. So it's not too extensive. What's interesting is British Columbia has its own regulations, the same as most of the states have their own regulations down south. And I was really looking forward to coming back and being able to go help out with some of the high school baseball program and, being able to help out with some of the youth development stuff that I had done previously when I'd come back. And this time, I think it was 2 or 3 days after I got back, they completely shut all that down. So that kind of squandered some of my, plans for the time that I was back too. And interestingly enough, over in Germany, obviously in a modulated capacity, there's training in the gyms and fitness studios and stuff like that are open. Whereas here right now, all that kind of stuff is shut down. So it is a little bit different that way. But it's just kind of the regulations and things that we're all kind of dealing with as we're laboring through these, like you said, crazy to say, but past couple of years, 2 years, right?
Canada's been pretty hardcore, so that's really not much of a surprise, especially with this Omicron and everything. It's just so. Give us a professional highlight here, because I have a lot of questions around baseball, and I love sports. I haven't talked sports much on this show, but this is kind of an opportunity, I guess, to kind of fill both of those voids. So tell us a little about baseball.
Well, I think for myself, what has kind of been the biggest blessing or kind of stroke of luck, so to say, that I've had with it is, for a lot of people, there's one avenue, right? It's viewed as like, hey, as an athlete, you have that one direction, whether you're playing football or hockey or basketball or even baseball. It's like, hey, you're going to one of the big 4 professional sports in North America. And I was no different. That was the main goal. And, obviously that was kind of the end game for a lot of people. Like, that's like, hey, that's my main goal to go. And I think along the way, it's really easy to lose pace or lose sight or, just various different things. And I think for myself, being able to have the opportunity to, travel the world essentially with it being paid for or facilitated by playing a game has been one of the best things. And a lot of people, just whether by, networking or knowing or just, being open to it, kind of close themselves off to that. And I think one of the biggest things for myself is just kind of being open to that. I've been able to see the world. I played in 7 different countries and, I've traveled around and seen quite a few different places. I've seen different parts of the world and been able to do it. So I think for me, the sport narrative in North America is very heavily based around, the core 4, which rightfully so. Those are the ones that are, the major ones that have the marketing and the big money sponsorships and the backings and things like that. But it kind of, the opportunities that do lie with a lot of sports around the world in various different ways are pretty incredible. And I just very fortunate to be a part of that and be able to continue to play the game and get paid and be able to do it. So I think for myself, that's kind of the biggest thing with ball.
With regard to professional baseball, so, I'm in the States, and I think a lot of us see professional baseball as just Major League Baseball. We don't, we know that some of the best players come from around the world, but in America, that is the peak. Is MLB viewed as the peak globally as well? The perplexity of it is, pretty deep. So I think one of the biggest things that gets missed, and again, if you're involved in it, you see it, but
If not, then, again, the main marketing is just, like you said, directed towards. And so what's really crazy is to get to that top level, each one of those, teams or organizations has at minimum 5 teams underneath them. Some have more, some have affiliate teams located in South America, whether it's in the Dominican or not so much in Venezuela anymore, just due to economic turmoil. But quite a few, had a lot of development programs in Venezuela, had a lot of development programs in the Dominican or in Puerto Rico or, different parts of Mexico and things like that. And so what's really interesting is, like you said, you see it. And, for myself, I can honestly say as a kid, I was like, oh yeah, you go to baseball, you go to college, or, you get drafted out of high school and you go and play. And then, the reality hits where it's, it is quite a bit different. There is quite a bit of levels within those organizations. And then on top of that, there's independent baseball. So teams that aren't directly affiliated with any of the big MLB organizations are considered independent. And what's pretty wild about independent baseball is there are a lot of very, very talented players in those ranks that are either former affiliate players, with one of those organizations, or guys that, maybe played at a smaller school and get an opportunity, that are just really talented. And a lot of guys do jump back and forth in between things. But oftentimes it just comes down to, right place, right time in some instances. It's kind of changing with social media and, the way that the narrative is kind of going towards data analytics and things like that. But it is really interesting. There's a lot of different avenues. And then even within that, there's different levels. So, there's independent, kind of the top echelon of independent compared to the lower levels of independent is quite a bit different. And then, the same thing in Europe. It's Europe baseball is, not really viewed the same way. And I think for a large majority of people, possibly even listening to this, probably don't even know that there is professional baseball in Europe. And, so for example, like you said, played in Germany this last year, played in what's called the first Bundesliga, which is like the first league. And then under that, there's 4 other tiers. And so, there's a lot of depth. And so to be able to play at the first tier in any league or country is pretty tough. And, obviously as you get more towards the MLB, you're at the very top of the talent and things like that. And one thing I think for a lot of people, it is viewed as, yeah, okay, well, if your talent's enough, you're going to go. The biggest thing is, you look how many high school players play every year, and then how many of those guys or girls don't go on to play college athletics.
Right.
And then from there, just that number gets smaller and smaller. So I look at it in a very different way than I used to foundationally, just because I've seen it, firsthand up and close.
So I think for a lot of us Americans, the thought might be, and I'm not talking to you like you're not an American, but
yeah, right.
The thought might be, well, if you're a professional baseball player, you play Major League Baseball, you play the Astros, but that's not necessarily the case. And that's kind of where I was getting with that, because you can make a very good living doing what you do, but how much, do you come up against that a lot in your life? You had to have at this point. Like, okay, I play professional ball. Oh, who do you play for? The Padres? You're like, well, no, I play for this team over here. And, how often does that come up? And is it frustrating at times?
I guess probably the easiest way to put it into perspective would be, if you're somebody that works for a Fortune 500 company, most people know those names, right? Because they're a global brand. The same thing as the MLB is a global brand, right? Like if you as you said, the Padres, Astros, Yankees, Red Sox, those names are household names. So they are pretty predominant in the world. But underneath that, as you and I know, right, in the tech spaces and things like that, there are a lot of really valuable companies that have amazing employees that a lot of people don't know those names. So that's kind of the easiest way to put it, that way is it's easy to get frustrated the same way as if you're in a startup or if you're in a smaller company that maybe, doesn't get the recognition or anything like that, but you're still a valuable asset to, the economy or the tech space or whatever. So, I have played with a few guys that have got pretty frustrated about it. I don't know. I wouldn't say that it didn't frustrate me because obviously when you're younger, things trigger you a little bit differently. But as I've kind of, wavered through the space and played in different places and things, it's really easy to kind of get annoyed or, whatever about it. But I look at it like this. It's an amazing opportunity. I get an opportunity to play a game and receive compensation for it. And if I was doing it just to chase the recognition or the fame, then I was probably in it for the wrong reasons anyway. So, again, one of the things that you and I have talked about, or even just with Brian or Wes as well too, is try to be as humble as possible, because I realize how quickly, it can kind of be taken away from me. So by me getting frustrated at somebody else for not knowing really isn't doing myself justice, right?
Yeah, and you had mentioned doing it for the wrong reasons, but I would imagine you've come across a fair number of people. How long have you been in this game?
So I signed my first contract 2014, so it would be 8 years. It'd be coming up on 8 years total. Yeah, and then if you include the winter summer scheduling, so it would be my 13th season, because I played winter ball and things like that. So if you include those as seasons as well,
so you had to have come across an abundance of people who were just doing it for the end goal of wanting to make the money, or in your circuit, in those levels, I hate to categorize it, but we did say MLB was kind of the pinnacle. In your levels, while you can make a very good living, are there people, you had to have come across people that just want it for the bread? Or maybe you've worked with people or have you had teammates that made it to the top and that's all they keep talking about is getting back there because of that, instead of feel like they've kind of lost the love of the game? Because baseball is a very sacred thing. It's so sacred, it's nauseating to a lot of us, all these unwritten rules of baseball, right? But the sanctity of the game. Have you come across that where someone may have lost it and that's all they talk about and you're like, dude, you don't get it?
Yeah, definitely. So, but I think what's really interesting is those guys get weeded out pretty quick, because it is such a humbling game. And, at various levels, depending on where you're at, you are doing it for the love of it. You're not doing it for the money. And again, sometimes, for any of us, right? Like somebody that puts up with, an overbearing boss, or somebody that puts up with various different situations because they're like, hey, if I grind it out, I'm going to be able to move up the ladder. It's kind of the same in that way. As far as kind of playing or facing against anybody that is kind of really like that, most of the time, those are the guys, like I said, that kind of get weeded out pretty quick.
Yeah.
A lot of guys in college, right? I just look at, my college experience. There's quite a few guys that are like, oh, I'm going to, become a professional baseball player, and I'm going to make so much money. I'm going to have the supermodel wife, and I'm going to drive a Ferrari, and, I'm going to have all that, which again, that is the picture that's kind of painted, right? But
right. Yep.
The harsh reality is, for that to happen, you're going to have to start at the bottom, because the second you sign a professional baseball contract, whether you are a first overall pick or an undrafted free agent or whatever, in the rung of professional baseball, you start from the very beginning. That's why, guys are considered rookies. They're considered sophomore. They're considered, a third or fourth, or, guys that get, 6-7 years underneath them, they start to be considered veterans. And so you're starting from, the lowest rung again. And to start on the lowest rung, you get humbled a lot, whether it's by the veteran guys or by coaches or just by learning, because it is a major learning curve. The processes that you go through in college. For example, going to junior college, or, even guys going to big D1s or D2s or things like that, everything is planned out and scheduled for you, right? Because they're investing in you to be successful for life, not just for baseball. And so again, some of the programs are aimed at, more heavily towards baseball, but at the same point, you're scheduled as a team to be in the weight room at 5:30 in the morning or 6 or whatever it is. And, you have practice every day from a specific time to a specific time. And when you're there, it is structured. And not that there isn't that structure within professional baseball, but you also have a lot of downtime. And so a lot of guys that don't have that, work ethic or drive to be able to continue doing it because they enjoy doing it, those are guys that get weaned out pretty quick, because they stop working out as much, and then maybe they lose a step, or they lose, the ability to fling the fastball a little bit harder, or swing harder, or make hard contact, or even, throw or whatever. And it's those little things. And so those guys get weeded out pretty quickly, because you don't have somebody constantly telling you, you need to be at the weight room, or, you need to be eating a certain time or eating a certain way, because the thing is there's so many other people waiting in the wings that if you don't take care of that stuff yourself, there's so many people coming off the conveyor belt behind you yearly that are coming out of college, coming out of high school, coming out of different places that are going to challenge you, that, you kind of have to take responsibility. So in a way, right, you're an entertainer. Being a professional athlete, you're an entertainer. And so, you're dealing with various different elements of trying to entertain people. And the minute you lose your value in that, they're going to get rid of you. And so I think that's a really humbling thing too. I've seen lots of guys that, I can very humbly say that I knew that were more talented than me, not even make it close to what I've been able to get to, because they just didn't have the work ethic or whatever. They thought they could just rest on their laurels. And again, I mean, it's different with any industry, but particularly in baseball or any other professional sport, it does happen quite often. And like you said, it is such a sacred game that all it takes is one kind of slight against your reputation, against your name, against, kind of whatever is going on. And it will follow you around for quite a while.
You know who Kenny Powers is?
Yeah, of course.
So as you're talking, I'm thinking about how many Kenny Powers do you get to play against? Guys that are just from the pros and just full of themselves. They keep fucking their shit up. But yeah, that's funny. So it's a team game, but
absolutely.
Is there a team game that's as lonely as baseball?
I mean, obviously at the professional level, I can only speak to the baseball element, but
right.
What's again, I think what's really interesting, right, is, as you said, it is a team sport, but a major dynamic of that is it is a lot of isolation, right? If you look at baseball in the way of the game is based around that one-on-one battle of the pitcher versus the hitter. Of course, the defense is behind the pitcher, and of course, he has other guys in the lineup. But the instantaneous, main revolve around baseball is very 1v1, and so there's a lot of isolation in that. I mean, you can be very successful as a team and have a couple guys struggling. Again, you can't have too many guys struggling because you do have to have, for example, if you have your leadoff hitter, your 3-4 hitter, and your 6 hitter doing well. Because of how baseball flows, those guys can help carry the team. Whereas morality and, again, it's so tough because everything, and as you said, it's such a traditionalist game in that way that numbers are so finite, right? Like you can't skew those. So an example of that is, I look at basketball. There's a lot of uncategorized things that happen in basketball or in hockey that are so important to the game. A guy that's really good at moving the floor, that's not a stat that shows up, right? He's really good at moving the defense around because he gets his guy chasing him around. Or in hockey, for example, a guy that's really good at setting a pick or setting a screen for, the defensive player to come down off the wing. Those are intangibles that a lot of things happen. Whereas baseball is very finite, right? Like if you're on defense and the ball is hit into your quadrant of where you're playing, you either catch the ball, you receive the ball on the ground, you throw it to a person. Like there's not a whole lot of room for, intangibles, right? Like if you ever hear, if anybody listening to this ever hears a baseball coach or baseball player talk about intangibles, they're talking about those little things that they see at practice, but it's not emulated in a game. And when it comes down to the professional side, a lot of it comes down to the numbers game. Of course, there are going to be some guys that are going to be around because of the intangible stuff, but the majority of it is very finite. If you look at how we view the MLB, because like you said, kind of use that as the flagship for the conversation. If you look at how you view the MLB players, it's like, okay, well, this guy strikes out a lot, but he, gets a lot of hits, or, when he does get hits, there's guys on base or different things like that. Those are stats, and that's just there, right? But he might be an amazing locker room guy. That's why he's sticking around, but fans can't see that. But oftentimes, because it is such a traditionalist game, it's like, hey, well, he's not hitting well. He's not hitting well in certain situations, so he's going to hit the bench. And then once you hit the bench, it's such a mental game that, if you're not on top of your mental side, it can spiral. I mean, for anybody, again, but just talking to the baseball, the mental stuff can spiral out of control pretty quick. And then it does feel even more lonely, right? Like if you're a guy that's struggling and you're, the other guys around you, or maybe the guy that is pushing for your position, or a guy that maybe you platoon with, because that happens a lot now in baseball, where, you kind of have a guy that platoons because he hits really well against guys that throw a certain way, and then the other guy hits well against. So
what does that mean? What does that mean to platoon with someone?
So essentially, let's just say you and I are both outfielders. We both have the flexibility to play the corner outfield, so we play left or right field. And you're a left-handed hitter, for example, and I'm a right-handed hitter. Maybe you see right-handed pitchers that throw from a certain arm angle, because there's a lot of different arm angles and release points with baseball. Not to get too technical, but just to kind of explain it a little bit more. A lot of different, release points or arm angles. And so if you're a guy that hits well against certain pitchers that throw from a certain release point, you'll play when those guys are pitching against us, or we're facing a team that's very heavily loaded with those.
Right.
And then adversely, I would play the other. Or, say you're playing a park or a field that is pretty big in the outfield, and I'm faster than you are. They're going to put me in there because I'm going to be able to cover more ground. Or, if it's more of a hitter's park and you're a better hitter, they're going to put you in the lineup. So that's kind of what it is like you're splitting time, essentially. That would be the easier way to explain it. Yeah.
No. Yeah. You've been doing this for professionally since 2014. Mm-hmm. You've had a few setbacks.
Yeah.
On injuries, right? So, this is, I think for most professional athletes, this is all they really want to do. And if they don't, they fizzle out real quick. So when you think that your livelihood and all you want to do is potentially threatened, or there's probably been times, I think when we met, you were on your way back and you re-injured or got injured, and it kind of put you in a dark place. Like what goes through your mind when something like that happens? And how do you stay motivated?
Well, I think, it kind of just to really just kind of peel back the layers of the onion. I think, anytime somebody's an entertainer and they have a certain asset that is their main, kind of their main thing, if you look at vocalists or singers, their thing, if they can't sing, it's not that they're useless as human beings, but in that field, they're not valuable anymore. So I think for baseball players, some of the biggest injuries come to knees or to, shoulders. And, I had reconstructive shoulder surgery before my professional career even started. And,
throwing shoulder?
That was really tough. Yeah. And, I went through, like you said, went through a pretty dark place, because the thing is, again, for the large majority of us, especially males, when we're in our late teens, early 20s, we're indestructible, right? And so we push ourselves. Maybe we don't take care of ourselves the way that maybe we should, or, people around us are trying to suggest. And our bodies break down in different ways. And I had, quite a bit of issues with my arm. And then I ended up having to have complete reconstruction done. And it was really tough, because I went from, having a lot of amazing prospects and came to a screaming halt. And so for myself, that was the first time I ever really went through any major setbacks. Like you go through, minor setbacks, whether it's a sprained ankle or, different things like that. But those are usually one that, maybe knocks you out for a game, or depending on where your threshold of different things are, it might not even knock you out. Right. And, that was tough. And so it kind of put me into a different place. So what you were talking about is when we first connected, I had ACL surgery, and it was kind of tough because it was right before the season started. And then obviously you compile in COVID, and you compile in all the different, narrative and the variables that are going on in the world. And it was kind of tough. And so, again, I've said it to you before, and I've said it to Wes and to Brian. One of the biggest things is I kind of really dove into, having you guys, and you guys are a huge support network for that. So I have to thank you again. And, thanks to the other guys for helping me with that a lot too, because like you said, it's so, it's really easy to go into a dark place if, you don't have a major support network. And it's not that you don't have the support network of teammates or friends or things like that. But again, they have to focus on their health and their game and stuff. And so it's not like they mean to leave you behind, but it can feel that way. And so by having a, support network and good group of people around you and everything, it helps out a lot. And so I was able to get through it. I think going through that, 10 years ago now, with my shoulder, and being able to kind of learn some different avenues of how to deal with things mentally, and not being afraid to, kind of admit that something's off and things like that has helped a lot. Because I know a few instances where guys haven't had to deal with a lot of adversity, and it happens, and it can derail a lot of things. And so we all deal with it in some aspect, in some way, but kind of having, the support network and being able to understand that I was going to be able to come back from it. Yeah, it might not be quite as quick as I maybe was, or I might not be able to explode the same way, but, you learn and grow in a different way. And, one of the athletes that I really kind of dove into and I read a lot about, because he came back from some pretty significant injuries, was Kobe. And, if you read his book, the Mamba mentality, or, you hear different interviews from him, one of the biggest things that he talked about, was in coming back, it's again, with a lot of things, but it's mindset, right? And knowing that, yeah, you might not be as quick or you might not be as strong or anything, but you can learn in a different way and become better. And I think for myself coming back this season, my mindset was totally different and allowed me to be successful in different ways. Whereas if I would have came back and just expected to be the same player, I think it would have probably pushed me to the brink of not enjoying it and, not being happy and probably, again, like you said, going probably even deeper into a darker place. So it's important to make sure, remember that you are human first, athlete second, I think.
When we met, you had a podcast, the Limitless Possibilities podcast.
Mm-hmm.
What was the inspiration to that? And did you find that therapeutic? Because I don't think you were playing at the time, you were rehabbing.
Yep.
Talk to us about the podcast. What happened to it? Is it coming back? And then talk about some of the complexities that came along with marrying during the pandemic era as, a non-citizen of another country.
Yeah. So a lot of stuff to unpack or kind of touch on, but, so the podcast for me was kind of something that I'd thought of doing before, but I wasn't sure kind of where to go with it. And, there's a book by Jim Quick. It's called Limitless. And, he kind of talks about, essentially, just to sum it up for anybody that hasn't read it, it really dives into mindset. And it was something that I kind of really have been, a big believer in for a long time. And, I just kind of went, this is something I thought about before, but I always kind of had the excuse for myself, well, you're too busy training or you're too busy, just living life. And I think that's something that happens for a lot of us. And so I kind of just went, there's no better time than right now. We're all in lockdown with pandemic in various different ways in different places. I'm not able to go and, train for 2, 3, 4 hours a day. I'm, stuck at home. I'm doing rehab stuff at home. I'm doing that at physio, but the large majority of my time is being spent at home. And realistically, compounding effect, you continue being, process oriented and things. And, whether it turns into a mega podcast or it just turns into something that people listen to, then, I'm pretty happy with that. And so I wasn't really too sure, how it would go. And, I kind of, did some research, and I've always listened to podcasts. And so I had actually been on another podcast. They'd asked me to come on, and, I kind of just fielded a bunch of questions, and that's always been something that I've never been, nervous to do. And then I kind of jumped into some podcast groups, and it was really funny. Like a lot of the concepts that I heard, and I'm sure, you can attest to this too. And, again, it's not that you're second guessing yourself, but it's, we're looking for that, reassurance, because it's like you're taking a leap into different waters that you've never been into. And so for myself, I was like, screw it. I'm just going to do it. And I threw up the trailer, and I was like, the second that trailer was up there, I was like, hey, this is real. I gotta do it. And, I don't think it was too long after that. I want to say within a week or two that I would have connected with yourself originally and connected with Wes. And then Brian wasn't too long after that we all kind of started communicating within the various chat groups and things that we were in. And then obviously it became a more singular, isolated, with the four of us talking and having various different people jump in and out of the groups and stuff. And so for myself, I definitely do think it was therapeutic. But I think the other thing is part of the kind of the belief, or I guess kind of part of the wanting to start it was, I know what opportunities have been open to me by asking questions or by, trying to open my mind to be more open-minded to things, just even with my baseball career. And there's so many people that have amazing stories from around the world. And, whether they're in the, a small corner of Iowa or, they're in like yourself in Arizona, or, for myself being somebody that's traveled around the world, there's so many amazing stories. I think everybody has their story and everybody's got the opportunity to chase it. And it's really interesting. A lot of people listen to content and consume content, but they won't chase that dream because of the unknown. And so I just went, you know what, really, possibilities really are limitless. We kind of just have to grow and take the risk sometimes. And so it was kind of like, you know what, I'm going to have people on that have taken risks in various different ways, whether it was moving across the country or starting that business that they've talked about, or writing that book, or being a professional athlete, moving to a different country to give themselves better opportunities, or chasing a dream. And, whether they've failed 10 times and gotten up 11, or they've, been successful to where they're a multi-millionaire, or, I had a couple different people on that had been very successful, made it to the top of the field and making it to the MLB or making it to various different places. And, I think for all of us, oftentimes we use people as a flagship. And so if, I could have a podcast where people are just down to earth, people that other people can resonate with and kind of be the beacon of light, that was kind of where I started from.
Did you find it therapeutic?
I did. And I also found myself early on, again, you learn as you're doing it, but early on, I was having the conversations to have the conversations. And I'm sure you'll know what I mean with that.
Absolutely.
And then as I got deeper into it, I started finding myself really believing and learning and, being what I was trying to emulate to everybody else. And it's interesting because, we've talked about this before, and you can't go back and re-listen to your original episodes because you'll laugh at yourself, or, you'll kind of be disgusted at yourself, or whatever, whatever emotion comes up. But, again, you have to start from somewhere. And so I think early on it was, very therapeutic. And then later on it became very inspirational and very eye-opening, and also just, very, very important for myself to, keep doing it and being involved in it. And then, again, like you said, it, about, I would have been 5 months into doing the podcast. And then, the pandemic combining on top of everything else that was going on, it was pretty crazy. And so getting married in Europe is quite a bit different. Myself being Canadian, fortunately, it was easier than it would have been if I was coming from somewhere else in the world, but still a lot of steps to go through. And definitely worth it, but a lot of things, a lot of pressure. And then to add on top of it, the pandemic, and there's a lot of things going on. And so one of the, things that I was involved with was a baseball training facility. And obviously that was shut down, and that hadn't been open for a year. And so the financials on that and everything were a mess. And so that got shut down. And because before getting married, I was living in Germany based on a working visa. And because I wasn't playing baseball because I had my knee, there's a lot of stuff. And so I did have to go through quite a bit of, red tape, or whatever you want to say, the bureaucratic process to get to that point. And it was a lot of stress, but I found that by, doing the interviews and stuff, it kind of helped me get through it, because I was like, hey, what I'm going through right now is tough, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel that I'm going to be able to continue to pursue and go after. And so it helped me, honestly, I think, by doing this. So ultimately the answer to your question is, yeah, it was ultimately therapeutic, but it helped me continue to drive forward. And, just listening to some of the stories from some of the different athletes or some of the different people that I had on, and, some of the injuries that they went through and how they came back from it. And, they learned, and like I said, referencing to reading Kobe's book, or, reading Limitless by Jim Quick, and or the book that you and Wes joked about last week with the Atomic Habits and things like that. I was able to kind of stay on top of, the mentality. I'm not going to say there wasn't days that I felt terrible, or just, was down on myself. And, but, it kind of helped me waver through. And then, I was ultimately able to put myself into a position to be very successful this past season. So it did help me a lot. And then unfortunately, due to the way the bubble was with the baseball season and having to be within the bubble and some of the restrictions that we were under and the time crunches and things like that we were under, I had to case the podcast for a little while. And I'm actually going to fire it back up in February, start doing interviews again, because I think not only for myself, but just a lot of the stories, it's too valuable to not get those out to the masses or to the public.
So you're home right now at the time we're recording this for the first time in 4 years. How has that been? How's the family structure? I think we both have had some fun stories of growing up and in issues in and around the house. How's that return to home been?
Well, I think it's obviously skewed a little bit with everything that's going on, right? My ability to kind of maybe visit with people or to, see people is varied and different, but it is amazing, right? Like how quickly we can kind of, I wouldn't say pivot or change, but we adapt to where we're at, right? And so I really recognize being back, like, the difference in the shopping or the distances to go and visit people or different things like that. It's something you don't recognize it growing up here and whatever, but being removed from it, you see it a lot differently. And so, even just the night coming home from, Calgary and the airport and driving through the mountain passes and stuff like that, it's just something that, again, it's just different. You're climbing up the mountain pass and then you're coming down through and it's snowing and different elements. So on that side, quite a bit different. As far as the reconnecting with family and stuff, I've stayed fairly close with everyone via, FaceTime or Zoom or, whatever various different media that we've been using to be able to connect and things in that way. But nothing beats being in person. I think the hardest part, right, is you can see little subtle differences when you're doing video chat and things like that, but you can really see the major changes when you're in person. So if you haven't seen somebody for a few months, you can kind of pick up things, but if you haven't seen somebody in person for years, it's a big difference. And so I think for myself, it kind of just putting it in a perspective that have changed myself a lot in that time, and other people change and adapt and evolve and grow in different ways in the years that you've been gone. And so kind of tethering your expectations, was something that was really important for me before. Coming back was just kind of understanding, not putting expectations for things to be a particular way, just kind of meeting everybody where they're at and seeing where things are and not projecting my former beliefs onto things or, having overarching expectations on how things were going to be and then missing, the ability for just to enjoy it or experience it for what it is.
I know that we had talked, there was some kind of strained relationships there and possibly some good and bad memories about growing up, especially specific to sports. We'll keep it specific to sports here. Is baseball has always kind of an escape for you, or something you felt like you were forced into, or was there any other sports? Like, how did you ultimately decide on baseball, and was everybody always supportive or not supportive?
Well, I think, again, where you grow up is a huge dictator on various different things. And so for myself, growing up, like hockey, still to the day, I can honestly say, hockey is by far my favorite sport. I loved it. And, I just loved the essence of the game and the way it flows and just everything about it. And, that was kind of my main, I guess, that was something that I really, really enjoyed and loved. And baseball just happened to be something that I was good at. And, I was at one point diagnosed with a heart condition. I was no longer able to play hockey. And so I really just dove into baseball and I'm not going to say I didn't work hard, because I did, but also didn't maybe work as hard as I could have if I would have been full-time in baseball when I was younger. And so at that point, when I got diagnosed with that, I decided, okay, well, this is going to be my avenue to get out of the smaller town. And so for anybody that doesn't know where Cranbrook is, it's located in the southeast corner of British Columbia. It's right in the heart of the Canadian Rockies, and it's a town of about 45,000 people, roughly, give or take. Depending on who you talk to with the consensus and things like that. But to make it easier, just about 45,000 people, and so it's very industrial. a lot of the region around here is very heavily based on mining or coal, forestry, or based on oil or different things like that. And so in communities like that, like blue collar communities, there is a different pressure in a different way. And I think for a lot of people, they don't, mean to put exponential pressure on people, but they want to see people succeed. I mean, it's kind of like the old adage, the dad that works at a mine or whatever. He's like, I don't want my kid to work there. So he pushes him to, Mickey Mantle is an example for anybody that knows Mickey Mantle. His dad was a miner, and dad pushed him pretty hard to be a baseball player because his dad didn't want him to work in the mines. And so, I think that's kind of a universal thing across the board for any blue collar town where it can't happen like that. And so there was quite a few different pressures. And particularly what was really interesting is, early on when, certain people started reading into or seeing that there was maybe, opportunity or talents or different things like that, it's really easy to forget that people are the age that they are. And with that, it's, instead of just being like, people, whether male, female, or just being kids, they're growing up again. There is a certain point to where you do have to have some sort of professionalism and everything to carry yourself, but you do still have to be a human and be a kid. And sometimes that can kind of get lost along the way. And in my own personal situation, or in some of the other situations I saw, it comes out in various different ways, right? It's the people wanting to see you be successful, but there's pushes in different ways, and sometimes people don't necessarily always see it. But it makes you, good, bad, or otherwise, it's kind of makes you who you are. But it's sometimes, unfortunately, it's not necessarily projected in the right way, but the actual meaning behind what's going on, if that may. It was tough. I felt it in a different way in various different aspects, because there was a lot of intangibles that were connected to it, like smaller town. And when you kind of get a little bit more success, then people are kind of pushing at you, or, I had people that maybe I wouldn't have been friends with, all of a sudden when it was being talked about in various different ways in high school, all of a sudden, they're trying to be friends with me, or, it had different, people try to cultivate or create relationships for, opportunities and things. And I was lucky enough to have a couple of people kind of help me a little bit with mentorship in that way, but people only know what they know to the point of their knowledge. And so when I kind of got to a point where nobody from my town had kind of ever been in that aspect of baseball, lots of guys have come out here professionally for hockey, but the baseball spectrum is quite a bit different. And so I kind of got to a point where I was kind of just trailblazing on my own. And I think that was kind of the point where to go back to the earlier part of the conversation, a lot of guys that don't want to do it for the passion of it, they kind of fizzle out. That was the point where I had to have a really deep, serious conversation with myself. Like, do you really enjoy this, or are you just trying to use this as we said, an escape? And I was like, no, I do enjoy it if I can really peel back all the other stuff. And so I was able to push through the injury and, moving to California and being away from home, and then, traveling around to different parts of the world and bouncing around to different teams and stuff and things like that. So I think that's helped me a lot. I do think, again, where you grew up shapes you a lot. And part of that blue collar mentality definitely, rubbed off onto myself too, or, hardworking and things like that. But as you kind of adapt and evolve to where you are, you kind of grow in a different way. And it's interesting to see like where you start to kind of where you're at. So
sounds like you appreciate that 4-year, that gap. You think that's something you and everybody needed?
I think so. I also think, again, that what is the old saying that time heals all, or, time reveals all. Right. And I think also along that line too is, for myself, I think if I hadn't gone through some of the growth, and gone through some of the understanding just of who I am and, what I value or different things, it probably wouldn't be the same. So in one way, I think, yeah, absolutely. The timeline is huge, but I also think a lot of it comes down to like the personal growth and development and work and stuff that I've done on myself has been a major player in it too. Because if I was in the same place that I was when I left and I hadn't done any introspective work, or I hadn't done any, growth or outreach or different things like that, I don't know if the time would have, helped.
So you said something earlier, and it's so true, but even with this 4-year gap, right? You still were able, when we have FaceTime, we have internet, we have all this ability to still keep in contact. So it's not like you just went on this 4-year sabbatical and you come back and all of a sudden your house is grown over with weeds because somebody moved down the street and all this kind of stuff. But still, that separation is kind of interesting on what it can do for people. We haven't talked to you much since last year. And when I say we, as in our group, how was your 2021?
I think the easiest way to sum it up would be if anybody's ever been to an amusement park and they've been on the roller coaster, a roller coaster. Really, lots of really, really great ups, and on the way down, it's like holding on to the holy shit handle on the way down and going, oh my God. But then, as it's going to pass and bound back up. But a lot of really great peaks and some different valleys along the way. And,
what?
I think overall,
like, what's your peak? Because I'm like that emotionally too. I'm way up and I could be way down. Like, what's your peak and what's your crash? Like, when's a crashing moment? What's a peaking moment? If you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, well, again, I think I kind of categorize it a little bit differently. So I kind of compartmentalize, how I view things in a couple different ways. I think personally, I had a pretty consistent year as far as, growth, relationship development, different things like that. Professionally is where I had quite a few different, peaks, coming back successfully from, surgery, first game back from, surgery. I hadn't played baseball in, at that point, 1.5 years or almost 2 years actually. Or no, yeah, sorry, my apologies, 1.5 years at that point. And my first at bat, I hit a home run, well over 400 feet. That's a huge peak, right? Like that's okay, sure. I'm back and I'm doing it. And then, kind of a low professionally, you're grinding it out and, you're putting in the work, and you can kind of see just, whether it's COVID or cultural mindset of the team that I was with or whatever, all the work we're doing, we'd won the most team, games up to that point that the program had ever done. And the management, for whatever reason, decided that, well, we're not going to continue to sustain it this way because it's, it's too much pressure on them. And so all of a sudden it was like, what? We're pushing forward and doing so well. And then all of a sudden it was like taking 10 steps back. So that was kind of a low. And I think it's really hard to not let that affect you professionally as well as personally. And so that was, that's tough. And I mean, that's part of the game that, talking about the mental game earlier, that is a major part of it, that you have to just really sit back and in any aspect of life, but professionally in baseball, you really have to just control what you can control. Because if you let the management stuff and you let all the, the drama and the BS, it will eat you alive. And so for myself, it was really hard, especially being the player coach, to not get involved in it. If I was just a player, I wouldn't care, like whatever. Being the coach, you're having these conversations and then trying to separate yourself, from the conversations that happened with management as a coach to then go out and play is tough. And then, it's also kind of isolating being the coach, because as a player, you can, have the hot stove sessions, as they're called in sports, where you kind of sit and you chat with the other guys in the team, but because you're the coach, they're not going to talk to you the same way. And so it was pretty, it was a huge learning experience doing it, but it was really isolating in that way too, because it was like, I couldn't share with management what I was thinking, because they'd be pissed because I, told them stuff that they didn't want to hear. And I couldn't share with guys on the team because, I can't share with them what management's talking about. And so it was kind of stuck in the middle, where I was kind of like,
sure.
All right. So that was, I would say that would kind of be the low, would be, kind of when we got into that point in the season where it was like, I had conflicting ideals coming at me from both ways. I mean, players are saying, well, what the heck, why are we not doing this? And then I'm trying to talk to management and they're going, well, we're not doing it. And I can only share so much information from both sides without, selling out on one side or the other. And so that was kind of, I would say that was a huge low professionally. And then just, personally, The narrative of the last couple of years, it's just, it's hit so many people in different ways. I've had a lot of friends or family members have health issues and, different things like that. And I think probably personally, the high was, being able to spend time with, friends and some guys that I played with previously even though it wasn't a bubble format, and then bringing the 1 year anniversary and things like that. And then the lows lows are what they are and they come in different ways. But, for myself, it all kind of culminated as it seems to do in various different ways as going through that professionally, and then personally had some losses. I had a friend hit a point where things just weren't looking up for him, and decided that it was time for him to leave. And that was kind of tough for me to deal with in a lot of different ways. He was, close buddy and roommate, and that really hit hard. And I'd say that would probably be the biggest low, honestly, is going through that. I culminated on top of the professional low at the same time for 2021. But although I do look at, 2021 as a huge growth year, and I think for myself, a lot of the habits and, systems and, my learning with communicating and not holding on to my feelings inwardly and, being okay, being vulnerable and talking about it has helped me majorly look at 2022 as being a year that, again, we're all going to have perfect years, because it's not how, the universe or humanity works. But I do look at 2022 is going to be, awesome because of the stuff that I did go through 2021.
Well, first off, I am sorry for your loss of losing an old roommate and good friend. And I kind of hinted at this earlier without really specifically pointing it out, but is being a professional baseball player is the biggest misconception that you're just a millionaire? Like, do people come at you for money? Because I don't know how much you get paid, but I know it's nowhere near what the public perception is, unless you're, I don't know, you just land a big break. If that's fair to say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Well, I think what's really interesting, it's kind of like we alluded to a little bit earlier. We view sports through the lens of what we see on TV.
Right. Marketing, media.
Yeah, exactly. And so majority of people do think that, because you are a professional athlete, that you are a millionaire, that you're rich. And, I'm not going to lie and say that I don't have a little bit of affluence, but I'm also not, running around dropping, $20,000 in a
Sure.
weekend. If I did
Right.
that, I'd probably be a little bit nervous about some things. So there is a different perspective on it. But again, it's kind of one of those things you just kind of learn. It kind of just comes with the nature, right? It's, people can only understand from their own lens of how they see things. And if their narrative or their belief is that everybody is, that's a professional athlete is a millionaire, I think one of the best ways to, for a lot of people to understand that is, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's called The Weight of Gold. It's a production. It actually started off as a book that Michael Phelps wrote, and it actually has turned into a documentary. I don't know what
interesting
facilitation company put it together, but it's called The Weight of Gold. And for anybody that hasn't seen it, I would suggest you watch it, because it without oversharing some of the stories that are talked about there on it, the generalization of it is, the ups and downs that athletes go through. When you're on top of the world and you're one of the best players, everybody loves you. And if you have a rough season or a rough, couple weeks, the media is so quick, and not just, again, it is on ESPN or different things like that, but it is so quick to happen. Your team sometimes turns on you or different, and it happens fast, and it can be really hard. And, the pressure that you go through, it can be really tough. And a lot of the guys or girls that were on there really talk about the ups and downs. And they talk about actually that question that you just asked is, the perception that everybody says, oh, well, you're an Olympic athlete or you're a professional athlete, you're rich and whatever. And
you got this. You could take care of us. Take care of us. We were there for you.
Yeah.
Just give us some money.
Mm-hmm. Or the other thing is that comes with that too is if you and I are both athletes and we go into a meeting with somebody to say that they're maybe interested in, offering a sponsorship or a partnership to us. And I say, yeah, I'm a professional athlete. And you say, well, I'm an amateur, but I think I have the opportunity to become a professional. Most businesses or different programs are going to give it to the person that is on their way up, not only for a marketing perspective, but also because the perception is that person's already rich, the professional athlete, when in reality, that's not necessarily always the case. And so they talk about that in the weight of gold. And I mean, I've experienced that myself. I've had a couple opportunities where I'm like, I would have loved to have been involved in that. Oh, well, we didn't think you'd want to because, you already have money in it.
You're already made. You've made it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, well, fair enough. Like I do appreciate it, but it's like at the same point, my career is only going to go for as long as I did. And after I'm done with that, I'm going to need something to, continue with. So, and, again, you can't be frustrated with people. They only know what they know and they're living from their perspective. But it is interesting to see. And I do think the narrative is starting to change a lot more because social media has shed the light on, again, you talked about earlier with the article that you discussed on with baseball salaries and, kind of minor leagues and things like that. And for anybody that knows what's going on in the major league or in the Major League Baseball Association, the strike right now. I mean, a large majority of that is based on compensation for work. I mean, there's a lot of guys that, play minor league baseball in the United States that are in some of the lower tiers that are barely getting paid, minimum wage or under minimum wage. And, there's ways that, those teams will pay out money and guys are getting, maybe say you sign his contract, and I've seen it, up close and personal. Not, I've been fortunate to not go through it myself, but I saw a couple guys where, maybe they're getting, $800 and their rent is included and all that kind of stuff. But then what's funny is, then they get their check at the end of the month and it's less than $200 and they're going, what? And when the rent is included, all of a sudden it's there's a little fine writing in there saying that the rent is included in them living there, but it's coming out of their paycheck. So instead of them receiving $800, they're losing the $200 for rent, and then they're losing $100 every 2 weeks for, locker room facilitation and stuff so that their uniforms look great. Cause I mean, most professional teams, you have guys washing your uniforms, cleaning your cleats, making sure that, you have fresh tape and stuff so that you do look great. But the thing is, that stuff doesn't come for free. That guy's got to get paid somehow. And most organizations, you pay locker room fees, which I've never met anybody that's complained about locker room fees because, those guys are incredibly valuable. I mean, they keep your equipment up top shape and, they make sure that your uniforms look good so that you look good when you go out. But it is a major factor that, that money comes from somewhere and those guys pay for it. So, you have some guys are paying 100, some guys are paying 25. It just depends on the contract you sign. So it is, again, it's coming from somewhere. And, that's one of the things, that's kind of like one of those, as we said, it's a traditional game. There's a lot of unwritten codes and unwritten rules. And one of the biggest things was, it's like, you just, shut up and play, because if you talk about it, they'll let you go because there's, 10,000 other guys that want your spot. And so it's kind of tough, but I do think,
right. That's a shitty way to go, but you're right. It's like, okay, well, there's a bunch of other people just willing to fill it in. I mean, baseball prints its own money. I don't know how it's doing compared to the other professional sports, at least here in the States, but I have to, like, most of them have profit sharing. I would assume the MLB is the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they can afford, like, you don't have to pay, because earlier you had mentioned that some of these teams have, 6 to 8. And then there's different tiers. My mind was blown. I thought everybody had like 1 or 2, right? But you don't have to give everyone $10,000 a month, but you have if they're going to be in your system, they have to at least be able to make some sort of a living, not necessarily live off it, because it's not 365 anyway.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the things. And I always again, when I was younger. It's always so easy. You say, "Oh man, I'd play professional." I remember being around guys that said, "Well, yeah, or man, I would do it for a bucket of baseballs or whatever." And it's like, okay, well, some guys are doing it. And you're like, what?
Right.
Like, because you just look at it, it's like, you see it glamorized. I mean, for anybody that's seen the show Entourage, right? Like they talk about it in Entourage. It's a very glamorous life, but that show kind of alludes into, obviously that's, film industry, but a lot of what they touch on there is like, when you're hitting highs, like you're way up there. I mean, if you're a male, you have girls coming at you from all over the place. And if you're a female, you have guys coming at you from all over the place. And if you're, you can get into clubs and you can get into these exclusive parties and you can do different things like that. But when you are on a low, it is a low, like it, and that stuff does not exist. Like it's gone quick. And, for baseball players again, like, or just athletes in general, it's the same thing. It's, maybe, you're not on a movie screen in front of, 250 million people or whatever the number might be, but, you do have followings and you have influence and things like that. And so one thing, kind of around the money or kind of the perception, like we talked about, I do think it is huge. The one, again, there are a lot of positives, but the one positive around sports with social media is that it has shed light on some of the garbage that has been happening for a long time. Because I had the benefit of playing for quite a few amazing coaches and different things in various spots, and have had conversations with guys who were top draft picks or, were guys that, did have an opportunity to have a cup of coffee in the MLB, or, guys that had been shuffled around, or guys that had been a part of trades or different things like that. And to hear some of the stories that these guys went through in the 80s, 90s now, I'm going, oh, wow. Like I know what I've experienced, and that was tough. For example, I won't say where, but one of the teams that I was on, we were living in a 2-bedroom apartment and there's 6 guys. And so you have 2 guys in each room, and then you have 2 guys living in the living room. And, I wasn't there for long. That, for myself, I was fortunate that was kind of just a pit stop. I was only there for a handful of games, and then I was out of there. But some of those guys, that was their last stop, or because they just couldn't do it anymore. They were over it. Yeah. And I mean, some of those guys were awesomely talented guys. Or, an example, you get down to winter ball in Puerto Rico, and we're down there. Winter ball was awesome. Again, can't complain. You're down there, especially for myself coming from, Canada and knowing what the winters are like here. I'm down there playing and, living in a tropical island and going surfing or swimming every day. And I'm eating, along the beach every day and stuff. And it was amazing. But for myself, like that wasn't my last stop. Whereas some of those guys, some of those teams that sent them there, they knew that was their last stop. And so, it was kind of tough to watch. I mean, you're seeing guys almost fade away like the sunset over the ocean. It's like, this is their last hurrah. And so that was kind of tough to see too. But, it's belly of the beast, right? And when you sign up for it, you kind of know, maybe don't know the whole ins and outs, but like I said earlier too, the guys that aren't able to kind of wade through it, they get phased out pretty quick.
Zach Johnson, recent resurgence on social media. How can people follow the adventures of Zach Johnson? This boy can rake.
I appreciate that. For myself, follow on Instagram. It's ZJ7, so ZEDJAY7 on Instagram. Not too active on Facebook. I kind of just have it as a placeholder to be able to communicate with some of the people that I've met around the world. Other than that, the podcast is the Limitless Possibilities podcast, and that will be starting up here soon. And maybe pop in and do maybe a One Drink Wednesday here with Jay again, and be able to be a little bit more prevalent with it, I think.
Awesome. Thanks, Zach. Good finally getting you on the pod. We'll have to do it again.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Jay, for having me on. I appreciate it. I mean, a little bit, but didn't feel like it at all. Enjoy conversing and kind of answering the conversation that you're asking for. So I appreciate having me on. Thank you very much.
I want to thank Zach Johnson for spending some time with me on the phone. Again, the connection was crap. Don't know if I really agree with the Fortune 500 comparison and people's lack of knowledge of professional baseball and what it means to be a professional baseball player outside of just Major League Baseball. I don't know. What do you guys think? Hardparkingpodcast@gmail.com. Questions, comments, or concerns. Next episode, we're going to jump into some car news. Still working on booking a lot of guests that I've promised you in the past. I look up and the time it's like, man, I have a few guests that I stay in contact with on social media, future guests, and I've been talking to them about joining the show or coming on the show for over a year. And it's not anything with avoidance, just like Zach Johnson said. It's just one of those weird timing things. So I'm working on getting my life straight. Also, Hard Parking logo is under redesign. Same great show, same great conversation, same great me. But you'll know it when you see it. It's nice. I want to thank Right Honda and Right Toyota out of Scottsdale, Arizona. Thank 4Wheel Online and Cell Shop Wireless Services. Can't forget Kuya Automotive out of Winter Garden, Florida as well. Sent me this little, I bought this little mini C32 motor, which is a NSX motor from the car that I sold. I'm going to do a video on that. I need to do a lot more videos. Special thanks to Mark Stoneman, Catherine Cox, Eddie Ramos, Richard Graves, Byron Jones, Bo Jung, Alex Gomina. They are my patrons. If you're interested in joining the Patreon and being a financial supporter of the show, go to patreon.com/Hard Parking Podcast. You can email the show. Oh my God. You can email the show, hardparkingpodcast@gmail.com. Follow me on Instagram at jfinning. That's JHAEPFENNING. Join the Hard Parking Violations Facebook page. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, man. It's Hard Parking Media. Go to YouTube, look at Hard Parking Media, find me, hit subscribe, hit the bell notification icon, watch a video or 50. I can't grow without you telling the world how great this show is. Let's do this. Let's grow this thing together. We'll talk to you all next week. Hey, it's Black History Month.
Now it's stripping time.
Shut up!